I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. Each week on this podcast, I try and discuss a topic or story from our lives. But every once in a while, I like to gather all those leftover topics and observations that on their own might not make a full podcast. I call them non sequiturs. And like beautiful flowers, they look best in a bunch. So let's get underway.
Season 5, Chapter 13, Non Sequiturs, Part 4.
Have you noticed that whenever you have to call or live chat a tech support person, that their entire purpose seems to be that they want to make you understand whatever troubles you're having are your fault? It's never them. Well, there was that nationwide Rogers outage. But outside of that, on the day-to-day, corporate tech support people must be trained to blame you. You must reboot, clear your cache, turn off your router, check your connections. I don't know, maybe they do deal with a lot of Luddites, but I've had it with them trying to make me feel stupid. It's not me, it's you. Then I figured out the problem. When I called them, I'd be playing defense. No good. Now I go on the offensive. Here's how that works. You call the 800 number. 1, English. By the way, if the English option is actually the number 2, the call center is probably in Montreal. No, I swear it is. I've even asked. Anyway, 1, all right, menu options, 3. Okay, more menu options. Could be 3 or 4, I don't know. Well, 3, hold music. Finally, a person. Hello, my name is. How can I help you? Immediately, I go on the offensive. Hello, I'll tell you my name and account details in a moment. But first, let me say, I have checked all my connections. I have rebooted everything at least twice. Everything worked yesterday. Nothing changed on my end, and it doesn't work today. I'm not calling to get advice. I'm calling to report a problem, and I need to know that you will take the time to solve it. I'd rather not wait on hold while you do that. Perhaps you can just call me back when you arrive at a solution, and hopefully that will be in a timely manner. Does that tactic work? Well, okay, rarely, but it is way more fun. I try and be respectful. These are people with jobs, but the more they talk down to me, the quicker that respect wanes. I don't know how they do it. Personally, I'd rather clean toilets at the addiction clinic than work at a call center. But you do what you got to do, I guess. Yeah, go on the offensive. You're paying for a service that's not working, and 90% of the time it's their fault. Oh yeah, and that Rogers outage? Remember how in the subsequent days they started talking about this outage that lasted up to 15 hours? So they can't tell time either. It was days for a lot of people. 15 hours. Nice try. I almost felt like calling them. Hey, have you checked all your connections? Have you tried rebooting? What about clearing your cache? You know what I think happened? I think it was a Friday going into a summer weekend, and too many people just left the office early. Hey, how is Jeep allowed to get away with showing commercials that depict fun-loving people driving gas-guzzling, greenhouse gas-emitting four-wheel drive vehicles deep into nature where vehicles normally aren't expected or frankly belong? They show them ravaging the environment, all for their own amusement. This is how you sell a Jeep? Well, they all do it. Jeep is just the worst. I think there's a Subaru commercial, though, where they stop their 4x4 and get out to help a turtle get out of the way, before being crushed by the steel-belted radial. See, these drivers care about the environment. Hey, how about this? How about you don't drive your SUV where turtles live? I know sometimes vehicles must get to odd places out of necessity, people's jobs. But these Jeep and, the Ram people et al., they seem to be just out for fun. They're hailed as weekend warriors. What are you warring against exactly? Because it appears to be Mother Nature.
If you really want to find out what you're made of, you can forget the personality tests and social media quizzes. Because the only way you're ever going to know is by heading into the big, wild, raging, so damn beautiful it hurts world and finding out for yourself.
So damn beautiful it hurts. What a way to describe our world. I think those commercials are assuming a sensitivity that is not possessed by their target audience. Oh, I have a genius car idea. I may have shared it before on Facebook, but here it is. When you are locking your car with a key fob, it's the key fob that should beep and not the car. That would cut way back on the racket. Well, first of all, those cars that have the horn sound instead of a beep when they're being locked, that should be banned altogether. That's completely unnecessary. Why do you have that quick, loud, two-beep horn honk when you lock the car? How about a nice, softer tone beep? And again, even my better idea, that it's your key fob that should quietly beep when you lock the car. And even better, you could have a setting that vibrates. So when you lock the car, you know it's locked because your key fob vibrated slightly in your hand. Oh, it's genius, all right. And if the auto industry would like to pay me millions of dollars for the idea, I accept. But at the very least, steal it. Steal this idea. Grand Theft Auto idea. And steal it now. And end this ridiculous noise pollution. Years ago, I was sitting alone in my living room on a rainy Sunday afternoon. The inclement weather had canceled my plans. Well, this was nice, just some quiet time alone, so I began flipping through the TV channels. One of the Buffalo network stations was running an old, scratchy black and white movie. Perfect, I thought. This movie looked like it would match the mood of the dark, gray, rainy day. It was the drawing room scene. Several well-dressed people seated about, looking tense. Camera cuts to the back of a man making a drink at a table. Medium close-up. Suddenly, he turns around. Why, I believe that's a young James Mason. And he says,
"It's fucked. It's fucked now, and it's always been fucked."
Why? I am shocked. Not because the word offends me, but because this is an old movie on a network channel on a Sunday afternoon. They did not use those words in the old movies. Also, they're not allowed on network TV. And it's a Sunday. Well, so much for my couch nap. I'm awake now. I continue to watch to try and understand what kind of depraved old movie I've picked to see here. As James Mason continues his monologue, it becomes clear to me what he was saying. It was fact. It's a fact. It's fact now, and it always has been fact. But it was James Mason. Fact? Fact. That particular moment has always amused me over the years. I've rarely shared the story publicly before. I don't know that at the time I even registered the name of the movie in my head. I've tried to look it up since, but James Mason was in a lot of old black and white scratchy movies. Maybe I'll come across it again one day, and I will know the name of the film. I can retell the story with that added little fact. Of course, movie-wise, there is a more famous, unintentional swear. Mother Superior in the movie The Sound of Music. It happens when Julie Andrews returns to the Abbey. The now famous...
Our Abbey is not to be used as an escape. What is it you can't face?
What is it you can't face?
What is it you can't face? Can't face, can't face, can't face.
I can't face him again.
She's not calling her a you-know-what face. Whenever I see that movie, I wait for that little scene, always snicker to myself. Hey, and I'm not going to say the actual word. I mean, I don't mind swearing on a podcast, but I draw the line there on that word. Hey, here's a mild expletive. It was only about 5 or 6 years ago when I first heard the term resting bitch face. If you've never heard the term, it refers to a person who is not expressing any emotion outwardly. They're not smiling, they're not crying, they're not scowling, just an at-rest, normal face. Yet they look bitchy, irritated, perturbed, slightly angry perhaps, in a bad mood. Some people just kind of have that look, that face. A resting bitch face is what we've called it. I found out that there's been some research about this, and it really is a thing. Resting bitch face. As a matter of fact, people just call it now RBF, like some disease. You know, he's got RBF. Scientists looked at people who were known for their RBF. Kanye West, actress Anna Kendrick, Queen Elizabeth. Any of these people, when they are smiling and being cordial, they're fine. But when they're not purposely expressing an emotion, their face looks like it is. It's a bitch face. Researchers looked at photos of these people when they were being neutral, and when people observed some of those images, they thought these people were in a bad mood or bitchy. Other images, say of people like Jennifer Aniston or Blake Lively, were also used in the research. People who saw them being neutral thought that they were happy. I guess it's the face you have. Now, there can be racial or gender bias as to how we perceive a resting bitch face. Reasons for the face can vary, can be your eye shape, the way your eyebrows are, the downturn of a mouth. These facial features can all add up to a resting bitch face. I've always thought that I had a bit of the RBF going, so much so that in certain social and work situations, I will make an effort to have a slight smile or smirk going on, or something to try and counter my RBF. Recently, during the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, she did manage a couple of appearances, remember? She was smiling, waving, looking radiant. One of the British commentators, though, noting that the Queen looked very pleased with it all, then added this observation about when she's not smiling. He said she does have a face that can look solemn when in repose. That phrase jumped out at me. He just said the Queen has a resting bitch face. Only he said it in such a nice way. Maybe we should change our reference to resting bitch face. A face that can look solemn when in repose. Lovely. It's funny because when I was a kid, like a lot of kids, I used to make goofy faces just to be a cut-up. And eventually, when the hilarity of it all wore off, Mom would finally say to me, you know, if you're not careful, your face is going to stay like that. Nah, how could that be? But it did make me think twice. After that, I always made sure to make goofy faces in moderation. I warned my goofy face-making friends of the possibility of permanent face goofiness. To this day, if I see someone who has an RBF, especially if it's someone older, I always think to myself, see, Mom was right. Your face stayed that way, didn't it? Sorry about your bitchy life. Old man yells at cloud. You end up with the face you deserve. But again, that could just be my bias. Perhaps it's just a face that looks solemn when it's in repose. It's another non-sequitur episode of my podcast with another random thought. I was watching a media professor lecture one day, and when it came to the topic of the battle against misinformation and disinformation, the professor said, "Try not to get your news from a media outlet driven by outrage." I wrote that down. I think that's a good rule to live by. Don't get your news from a media outlet driven by outrage. I would say even if that media outlet is your brethren on Twitter, maybe especially so. I would also add, try and not get your news from a media outlet driven by profit. But geez, isn't that all of them? After all, it is called the news business, and I really don't see any way out of that. I mean, we don't want state-run media, like, say, Russia. I suppose public broadcasting systems, funded by donations both private and corporate, is the closest thing we have to an ideal model, but even their best efforts in gathering news and information don't seem to go mainstream. I guess for us, multi-sourcing our information is the best avenue, but most of us don't have or can't be bothered putting in the time. This is where we're at. We'll check the flyers and compare the prices when it comes to consuming almost any good or service. But when it comes to information, any bargain basement brand will do, even if it contains all these unhealthy additives. Incidentally, recently, CNN made it a public policy to start cutting back on the phrase breaking news. They were using it constantly. This one time I happened to look over and the big breaking news logo came up on screen. You know what happened next? They went to a commercial. They were using breaking news as some sort of branding phrase. They've really toned it down. Now they use phrases like developing story, this just in, new information, and they only use breaking news when some news is actually breaking. Good job. Slight improvement, but they still love their branding, though. They dubbed the recent heat wave and wildfires as Airmageddon. Wow. Oh, and here's something I want to point out that most news anchors now do, across the board. Reporters, too, regardless of the channel. Instead of just reporting a story and the information, they try and add context to the story. Because apparently, I'm not smart enough to give the story context on my own. They often do it quickly and in subtle ways. A school shooting. There's footage of a weeping parent talking about the loss of a child. Cut back to the anchor at the desk. There's a pause, a stare into the camera, and they say, "What a sad story." Really? You had to add that? You had to tell me that that was horribly sad? Is that what you're reporting? I couldn't understand that all by myself. I get it. They are human too. And the sadness, the horror, the devastation that people suffer is sometimes part of the story. But don't add context. There was a reporter in Ukraine told me about the shelling of an apartment building on a Saturday morning. Standing at the base near the rubble of the partially destroyed apartment, she started to report, can you imagine a Saturday morning? Your family is having breakfast when suddenly a missile hits your building. She was adding context. As it turns out, she hadn't been able to talk to any of the survivors. She was just trying to paint a picture. She had no way of knowing what the residents were actually doing at the time the bomb hit. She made it up for drama. No big deal, right? Except now I always wonder what else she is making up. Oh, one more. A news anchor was reporting on American deaths due to COVID. 830,000 at the time, and said, "That's nearly a million." Hold on there, math professor. Let me grab my electronic calculating device. I want to check those numbers. Yeah, I guess 830,000 is pushing a million. But when it comes to life and death, is it fair to just round up or down for our convenience? Like 830,000 wasn't shocking enough. I guess he threw in the extra population of a pretty good-sized city to round up to a million, just so he could say the emphatic 1 million. Stop trying to add context. For one, your context is not always my context. And ergo, you are no longer in the truth game. You're in the op-ed department. Remember when texting first became available? You had to open up your flip phone with a tiny screen, press 2 once for A, quickly for B, so on and so forth through the entire little keypad. What a pain. So out of that came a whole series of text speak. The abbreviations, right? BRB, BFN, LOL. So here's the question. Now we have full live keyboards, bigger screens. Not only that, technology that auto-finishes full words for us. Even gives us a selection of words we might want to say next. THO, though, thought, thoughtful. So with all that, why do we still use the short forms and more of them every day? Don't you think it's time to end those? I do. IMHO. I figured out that I would rather know a lot about someone I hardly know than to find out that someone I thought I knew well, I really didn't know at all. Social media lets me do both.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.
Because you said you did a podcast, so I wrote this little song called Mr. Podcast. My name is Larry. What are you going to talk about? Mr. Podcast. You keep us informed. We have good points. Mr. Podcast. And that's it.